Nice to be with you all here tonight. I jumped into my Lyft at the airport and headed over to the hotel earlier this afternoon. And as I was getting into the car, I saw a bumper sticker on the back, and it said, "I love peanut butter." So I get into the car, and of course, I'm really curious. What does this guy mean by "I love peanut butter"? So I'm like, what's with the bumper sticker? What's about loving peanut butter? Well, I just love peanut butter. I mean, I got to have it every day. It's kind of like my coffee. It's my caffeine. It's my fix. It's kind of who I am. It's peanut butter. Like, Skippy, smooth, chunky. He's like, I'm a Peter Pan man. Like, sometimes I have the organic stuff that's not quite as sweet, whatever. And I'm like, really? How does somebody get so interested in peanut butter? And he goes on to tell me that he was married when he was 23, got divorced a couple of years later, when he finally came to the realization that he didn't have to live his life to somebody else's dream, to somebody else's formula, that he could be who he authentically was. And he's committed to not have any children. And I'm like, isn't that a little bit selfish? And he's like, yeah, but that's how I am. We can do that today. We don't have to do what other people want us to do. And I kind of want to share with you tonight a few reasons and examples, anecdotes, pieces from St. Francis de Sales that suggest that there's another way to live your life. In a few short minutes, I shared with him something I learned from a fantastic priest, a great friend of mine, and somebody who I think is going to be a tremendous saint someday, is Father Robert Spitzer. But he came across these things, or sort of took Aristotle's ideas and put it in a format that's a little bit easier for us to digest and comprehend. This guy thinks really big, talks about quark theory and multi-universes and string theory, but then puts things in simple words so I can understand them. He said there's 4 levels of happiness, and I'm telling this to the Lyft driver. The first level of happiness is immediate sentient gratification. I eat peanut butter because it tastes really good, but you can only eat so much peanut butter. He's like, yeah, you can only eat so much peanut butter. 2 is intellectual gratification. I'm cool because I'm smart, I'm handsome, I can run really fast, but you can only have so much ego gratification. It gets a little bit tired thinking about yourself all the time, a little wearisome trying to one-up the other guy. The third level of happiness is when you move beyond the self towards the good of the other, and you start to live your life for somebody else's happiness and not selfishly for your own. And that's where you find real happiness that lasts not only in this life, but of course, the ultimate end is the one thereafter. And the fourth level, of course, is doing the will of God. And that's our ultimate end, of course. And that's kind of what I want to share with you a little bit today. When I was maybe half your age, I'm looking around this mall that I'm told this is a mall, and see all these eager, beautiful young faces. I'm thinking I'm probably at least twice your age. I'm 44. I know I don't look a day over 50, but I'm only 44. And when I was 19 years old, I had a girlfriend, and we started to get a bit serious. She was raised in a lax Jewish family, and she started to express a real interest in the Catholic faith. And that's when I'm like, I really like this girl. And so I asked my dad, who to this day tells me what to do all the time, Dad, what do you think? Should I marry this girl? He's like, Elizabeth's pretty cool, but that's something you have to decide for yourself. I'm like, Dad, come on. The one time when I want your opinion, help me out here. Wasn't happening. So, called up the secretary at my local parish. I've born and raised Catholic, and I better talk to my priest and see what he has to say. So we make an appointment, and Elizabeth and I go in there one Saturday morning. And the priest immediately launches into 17 different reasons why we shouldn't get married at such a young age. That we should have a good job, should mature and be responsible and control our passions, should have, all the reasons why you're immature when you're 19 or 20 years old. And after about 10 minutes, Elizabeth and I had really said nothing. He whips out a calendar and says, the church can't tell you not to get married. Does August 13th work for you? And of course, I'm not like, oh, I got a haircut or something. So we walk out of the rectory, and we're engaged, and we have a wedding date. And we end up getting married. Within a few days, we're expecting. And I dropped out of school for the third time, making less than $2,000 a month. And I'm married with a kid on the way. And I'm like, where's the roadmap for this? Where do I go from here? And I've always been a practicing Catholic. I've done lots of stupid things. And you priests, I've been in your confessionals many, many times. Thank you so much. God is a merciful God and love going to confession. So my dad, in his infinite wisdom, gave me a book for Christmas that year. A book that I'd never heard of before. A book that had an intellectual sounding title that I didn't understand. It was called The Introduction to the Devout Life from St. Francis de Sales. And here's the copy he gave me in 1994, probably before a lot of you were born. And I've been reading it pretty much every day since then. And I want to encourage you all, and you are taking a copy home. I've seen them and I got one. Read it every day. It's like a page or two, just one little chapter. And it is full of tremendous wisdom and insight in every aspect of life. And even though it was written hundreds of years ago, it is so relevant right now in 2017 for all of you. You might not know that yet because you're young and you just don't know that much. But trust me, I know. I've been where you are. Trust me. So, right at the beginning of this book, I was going to try to paraphrase a lot of this, but it's like, how do you paraphrase St. Francis de Sales? That sounds so good. So he starts out right at the beginning of the book. But even as Joshua and Caleb declared that the land of promise was good and fair, and that the possession of it would be easy and pleasant, so the Holy Spirit, speaking by all the saints and our blessed Lord himself, assure us that a devout life is lovely, pleasant, and happy. And here this is not talking about heaven, he's talking about right now. And you see so many of your fellow millennials that are not happy. They're depressed, they're lonely, they're confused, they don't know how to live their life. And it's because they're listening to the world to live life for themselves and to not live life for God. So I want to talk about just 3 subjects briefly, and then we'll get on to clubbing over here in front of the band. Woo! I actually went clubbing last weekend. My nephew turned 21. It's very embarrassing. So I want to talk on friendship. I want to touch on friendship, on marriage, and on business. And these things that St. Francis writes about, he does it in a way that's so beautiful and so relevant that I really encourage you to consider what he has to say. So even though some of you are young, I know some of you are married. How many do we have married here today? So 23 years and 10 children. So there's the benchmark. Beat me. So of course, prior to marriage, You established the fact that you were BFFs. A most important aspect of the devout life is authentic friendship. And starting on page 166, Francis tells us that love is chief among the passions of the soul. Love is king of the heart's impulses. Love draws all things to itself and makes us like to what we love. This is St. Francis's warning us that while we should be friendly to all, we must be circumspect in entering into friendships that are not based on virtue. How many young people, comments Francis, do not hesitate to say that such and such a one is very amiable and has great merit because he dances well and is skillful in games or dresses or sings or talks well or is very handsome or has hundreds of Facebook friends, knows every baseball stat, and has a big pimp roll at Amazon. By reason of their excessive vanity and imperfections, such friendships can find no root but frivolity. Francis calls flirtations based on qualities other than virtue foolish friendships or shadow friendships. They're not real. They cannot serve as a secure foundation for helping others to get to heaven or to lead a good and holy marriage. Instead, they are recipes for disaster. Francis warns that those who play with fire are in danger of losing both their honor and their soul. These are pretty powerful words. Authentic relationships have nothing to do with how many Facebook friends you have. They have nothing to do with our hookup culture. So what are the telltale signs to look for? Here are a few of Francis's pearls of wisdom regarding true friendship. I would bid you to have no friendship save those who can interchange virtuous love with you, he maintains. The more your friendship stands on the foundation of virtue, the more perfect it will be. It will be precious because it has its origin in God. What a good thing it is to love on earth as we shall love in heaven. Learn to cherish one another here as we shall do forever there. Remember, these words were written hundreds of years ago, but so beautiful and so appropriate for our serious contemplation today. A best friend of mine was my first cousin. We were tremendous buds. We did everything together, challenged each other to go off the biggest dirt bike jumps and do the craziest activities. But we also challenged each other to get up in the morning and get to Mass, get to confession when we needed to. He was best man at my wedding. I was best man at his wedding. But over the years, he failed to see the love in the law, became kind of a stoic, and we began to drift apart. Eventually left his wife and kids and ended up taking his own life. But he failed to see the love in the laws that God gave us, the roadmap that God has gave us. Love, of course, is first and foremost. But like Javert and Les Mis, if you've read that book, if you've seen the movie that actually was put together pretty good, Hollywood generally doesn't do anything good with anything. But that movie Les Mis is tremendously Catholic in so many different ways. You got to fast forward a couple of parts, but it's pretty good. But this idea of despair and not seeing God's fingers in how we were supposed to live our lives is not a good path to follow. And this is one of the first people I knew personally, knew well that died. And it had a big impact on me. And it made me more intentional and considerate about how I interact with other folks, how I can contribute in a positive way to their spiritual growth, how they can die a beautiful and holy death, or the other way around. Francis says of true friendship, starting on page 172, if you're following along in your books or you're just curious, This really is from the book. I'm not making some of this up. Paraphrase a little bit. If your bond be charity, devotion, and Christian perfection, then indeed will your friendship be precious. Precious because it has its origin in God, because it is maintained in God, and because it will endure forever in Him. What a good thing it is to love on earth as we shall love in heaven, and to learn to cherish one another here as we shall do forever there. Who doesn't want friends like that? When my friends complain that they have nothing to do or they have no friends, I say, well, if you want a friend, be one, right? Treat people well, and they just might treat you well back. So this is really when Elizabeth and I started to get serious. I love the conversations, the friendship, the camaraderie that I had with her, water skiing together and hiking and whatnot. She's smoking hot. But her tremendous interest in the Catholic faith, truly drew me closer to her. She was raised in a lax Jewish family, as I mentioned, and I like to brag to folks that I'm the reason that she came into the Catholic Church. It was my intellectual rigor, amazing knowledge of Scripture, my tremendous humility. Not really. In reality, I have a lot to extend to my parents. My parents are awesome. They were a holy example of committed Catholics. They always welcomed everyone into their homes, and they never ceased to share Christ's love with anybody that would subject themselves at the dinner table. When my mom had her first child in the late 60s and found the schools less than desirable, she founded her own Montessori school. Montessori is really awesome, by the way. A lot of people don't know what authentic Montessori teaching is all about, but it's super Catholic. It's not new age and weird. So authentic Montessori is fantastic, and I really encourage you all to consider that for your children. My mother's been involved in education for a long, long time. Not just childhood education, but that's always been her focus and her greatest love, because she said that in your early childhood years, in your first several years of life, is when we develop our capacity and desire for learning. We develop and define our capacity for love and for trust. So something really to focus on as you finally get around to getting married and having children. So my mom gave my wife good books to read. You should always be reading. This doesn't mean Facebook posts and LinkedIn hits, but like books, real books, like paper books, not on your Kindle, but like a book. It's very impactful and important. And you should read good stuff. You can bounce into the fiction here and there and the self-help books and the business things and all that, but read good Catholic books. Mostly there's nothing really good that is written in the last 50 years. So old books are really good. Read some. Chesterton. Has anybody read an entire book that Chesterton wrote? That's amazing. His books are very difficult to get through, but so profound. One of my favorite. He's my favorite author. All right, so where am I going? Let me find my spot here. My mother also directed Elizabeth, my wife, fiance, girlfriend, to an awesome professor at Seattle University, a Jesuit named Father Robert Spitzer, which I mentioned to you before. So she spent 2 years in class with this guy every day, which is just amazing if you've ever met this guy or heard about him. And so what does Francis have to say about marriage? He says it is holy to the poor as it is to the rich, in everything, for its institution, its end, its purpose, its form and its matter are all holy. It is the orchard of Christianity, which fills the world with the faithful in order to fill up the number of the elect in heaven. And it greatly concerns the public welfare that the sanctity of marriage, which is the source of all its well-being, be preserved inviolate. Unfortunately, we see too many examples in our society today where this is not the case. Francis continues, I exhort married persons to have that mutual love which is so earnestly enjoined by the Holy Ghost in the Scriptures. It is little to have natural love, for a pair of turtle doves has the same. Or mere human love, for in that the heathen were not lacking. But I say with St. Paul, husbands, love your wives, as Christ also loved the church. Let women be subject to their husbands, as to the Lord. It was God who brought Eve to Adam and gave her to him as his wife. And it is God, my friends, who with his invisible hand bound the knot which unites you and gave you to one another. Therefore give good heed that you cherish a love which is holy and sacred and divine. He talks about one of the proper ends of marriage being the birth and bringing up of children. And surely it is a great honor to be permitted to increase the number of souls whom God will save. Your part being to bring forth those bodies into which he will infuse an immortal soul that has the potential to attain heaven and worship the face of God for all eternity. What a blessing it would be if our marriage counselors spoke this way to engaged couples or to couples struggling with challenges in their marriages and avoiding painful divorce and separation. The plummeting population across the globe is certainly a great victory for the devil. God goes by many different names, one of which is Creator. And his first command to Adam and Eve was, go forth and multiply and fill the earth. He didn't say, have 2.2 kids and make sure you set aside enough cash to take that Hawaii trip at least once a year. My dad has a name for God's design around marriage. There's a lot of talk around contraception. There's talk about natural family planning. My dad likes to talk about supernatural family planning. Seems pretty basic, but I think it's beautiful. So Elizabeth and I had our first kid 9 months after our wedding night, and we celebrated 23 years of marriage, August 13th. And we have 10 children, which we're very grateful for. So on to a little bit about business, and I'll wrap up here in a minute. The great majority of you will not respond to a call to the religious life, though I hope you strongly consider it. When I finished 8th grade, my dad said, hey, Gillard, you want to go to the seminary up in Canada? And I'm like, no. And that was my entire discernment process. I have greater hope for you. So most of you will respond to a vocation in the business life. This is not contrary to your Catholic faith. It's not contrary to another vocation. It is your vocation to be in the business world. This is something that is good. Work is good. We just have to go about it the right way. Over the first 15 years of my professional life, I helped start a coffee company. And we grew that into a worldwide manufacturer and distributor, while Elizabeth devoted most of her time to homeschooling our children. I was traveling to New York and London and Tokyo and Seoul, neglecting my family, but trying to have a positive impact in the world. And I loved coffee. My dad was a cop, and I was weaned on coffee. I went right from the breast to what he called coffee cocoa. It was a bottle full of milk with a scoop of instant coffee and a scoop of sugar in the microwave. And that's what I started drinking when I was 1.5 or 2. I loved our mission to bring good coffee. We started in the early 90s, and we basically followed Starbucks around the world at a time when they would only sell coffee to the highest end restaurants and hotels. We brought quality coffee to the masses and set up coffee roasting operations in Europe and Asia and places closer to the point of consumption to roast coffee to the local taste profiles and make sure it was fresh and good and all that. It was really fun. But as we grew the company, and I spent most of my time opening up new channels of distribution. Business development is sort of the term, but I would go after big box retailers, Walmart and Costco and things. I'd go after hotel chains and call on Hyatt in Chicago and Starwood in New York and Hilton down in Beverly Hills, and then opened up the international markets and just started cold calling people in Poland and Korea and stuff. It was pretty fun. I was in my mid-20s, late 20s. Something I wasn't educated for or trained for, but it was fun, and I did okay at it. It was very exciting, but as we grew and took on these larger customers, it became less about our mission, less about serving a good cup of coffee, and more about the financial opportunity. I was in the Netherlands talking with the largest grocery chain in the world, and we were strategizing, and they said, well, we need to go back to the government and talk with them about our plans together. I'm like, you're a private corporation. Who cares what the government has to say? And they go, yeah, that's true, but we actually collaborate with the government. We don't just exist for the benefit of the shareholders. We exist for the benefit of our employees and our customers who happen to be the citizens of this country. And we work together in collaboration. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's about people. It's not just about making money. And initially I was kind of shocked, but it kind of resonated. That idea resonated with me. So in our society today, we're told that there are two different perspectives, socialist and capitalist. And I gave a talk to our employees one day, and I said, everybody, all right, whoever identifies as socialist and is comfortable sharing that with the crowd, raise your hand. So you can do that now. If you identify as a socialist, you can raise your hand. No one? I don't see anybody. So if you consider yourself a capitalist, you're a free market capitalist, raise your hand. I'm seeing quite a few hands, but I don't see all of them go up. And I have a pretty good guess that most of you are committed Catholics or heading in that direction or struggling with that decision, as I do each and every day. Socialism suggests that we don't have the right to own anything. There's no right to private property. There's no existence of God. Most people kind of think that's a bad idea. And we can see where that's taken us with communism and all this. On the other end, this free market idea, the idea that you do have the right to own something, is what the capitalists suggest, but furthermore, you have the right to do whatever you want with it, and nobody can tell you what to do with your stuff. I would suggest that you do have the right to own a gun, but I don't think you have the right to do whatever you want with that gun. It was a lunch meeting. I said, you can't shoot somebody and take their pizza. It's not nice. And these aren't Catholics, but they're human beings, and they have a high regard for each other, and they love each other. And that idea resonates with them. When we live in community, we have an obligation to look out for each other's well-being. How does that manifest itself? Let's see. I have some solutions or ideas here. St. Francis has some ideas around business. On page 156, no man will own that he is avaricious. That's greedy. Everyone repudiates this despicable narrowness of heart. Men excuse themselves on the plea of providing for their children or on that of prudence and forethought. They never have too much, but always find some good reason for seeking more. And even the greatest misers not only will not confess their avarice, but in their consciences they do not believe themselves to be avaricious. For it is as a burning fever, which as it grows stronger, is the less noticed by its victim. I'm sure a lot of you priests can appreciate those comments. Got to help us really get to the root of our issues in the confessional. So I had a guy that worked with me in the lending business. I started a mortgage company, and he told me about his first experience when he went to work for the first broker, helping people buy homes, providing financing for people to buy homes. And you've probably heard some, stories about mortgage brokers in the news over the last decade. But this gal brought him down to a closing, and she said, John, you have to go to the closing, make sure the documents are written up correctly, answer any questions the borrower has, and then give him a high five, and then you'll get a referral and you'll get the next deal. So they go down to a closing. Gal's typing up the closing documents. She makes a comment to the broker, and she says, hey, the borrower is doing a cash out refinance. It means they're refinancing their home, taking some cash out of the equity to repair the roof on their home, whatever the case may be. She says, hey, Miss Broker, you're taking more money out in commission than the borrower is taking out to fix their roof. Don't you think that's a little excessive? And the broker lays into this poor gal. That's none of your business. The borrower signed all the disclosures. I've done everything the right way. It's completely legal. They have a chance to shop me on the internet. The borrower is super happy. You watch when he comes in, he's super happy. Just draw up the documents. So she does. In comes the borrower. It's a veteran in a wheelchair with no legs. And my friend John is like, oh my gosh, the customer doesn't know. This is not a free exchange of buyer and seller on equal terms. People don't know. And I've witnessed things like this many times in the business world. And to leave the free market to its own device is not a good solution for all of us. I'm not a big fan of huge government either. I think we have to solve our problems together. And that led me to look into more what the Catholic Church had to say about business. Oh, but before that, what do we learn in school? And some of you have attended business classes. Wait, isn't greed good? Isn't that what they teach us in school, that greed is good, and by being greedy, you'll help create jobs for other people? But St. Francis says, we seek to buy cheap and sell dear. We demand justice towards others, but towards ourselves mercy and indulgence. I was at a conference and ran into a Catholic priest, and hey, what do you do? What's your role? This is why I teach in the graduate program at one of the big Catholic universities in the United States. I'm like, wow, that's awesome. A Catholic priest teaching in a graduate business program in a very notable school that you would know well. What's your area of focus? Negotiation. That's fantastic. I'm super curious how you integrate the principles of Catholic social teaching into your curriculum on negotiation. And he says, well, supply and demand this and price optimization that. And I'm like, no, my question was around the principles of Catholic social teaching as it comes to negotiation. We were in a shuttle and we pulled up to the curb and he turned really red and scurried off. It took the church a couple of 100 years because she moves pretty slow, but she finally began to identify some principles upon which our economic society should function, what are now known as the principles of Catholic social teaching. Some terms you may have heard of are subsidiarity, solidarity, the common good, some things you should really dig into. So when a friend of mine and I launched this mortgage company 10 years ago, we consecrated the company to the Sacred Heart and committed to operate the business based upon the principles of Catholic social teaching. So last year, we brought that vision to fulfillment in creating an employee stock ownership plan. And now the 360 employees own the company themselves. Chesterton said the problem with capitalism is that it leads to too few capitalists. Ownership tends to get more and more centralized, when in reality, the best solution for society is a broad distribution of ownership. And an employee stock ownership plan achieves just that. The employees are the shareholders. And the traditional conflict so aptly portrayed in the movie The Incredibles, which I'm sure you've all seen, it's about the shareholders. Instead, there's an opportunity for authentic human flourishing, where careers can blossom, a sense of mission is realized, a great work environment enjoyed, and a sufficient retirement put into place. I encourage you to read about distributism. There's some compelling arguments for shifting the way we do things in our political economy today. I'm not a fan of socialism. I'm not a communist. But I think we need to realize a more distinct obligation to support each other. Another quick example, there's a factory in Bangladesh making t-shirts, and the US company's buying these t-shirts for 18 cents and selling them on the shelf for 30 bucks. The factory in Bangladesh was constructed of such poor quality that the roof collapsed and killed most of the predominantly women and children that were working in that factory. And the gal that told me the story, she's from France, she's like, we can do better than that as a society. Our free market doesn't have a solution. But you know what? We're intelligent, caring, loving people, and we can come up with some. But we need to continue to educate ourselves. Read good books, learn good philosophy. In fact, tomorrow you can continue your education by hearing from Joe Burke deliver his keynote address called Epic Fails in the Anatomy of Courage. And I think one thing he wants to talk about is trying. I met a Navy SEAL. You guys may have met some Navy SEALs before, but they're like the baddest ass guys ever in the whole world. But they go through one final week of training. It's called BUDS, down in Coronado in San Diego. And during that week of trials, there's a gigantic bell that whenever you want to quit, you ring that bell and you go get a nice hot shower. But these guys have spent literally years preparing for this 1 week. And the first few days, they get very little sleep, and they're sleeping like in inches of water, and they're not just physically drained, but they're emotionally drained. And at the end of the third day, they're standing on the beach in Coronado, which is like one of the most beautiful places in the entire world. My sister used to live 2 blocks away, and the sun's dropping down over the Pacific. It's absolutely gorgeous. But these guys are totally beat. And the sergeant grabs the little blowhorn. Hey, you get a 5-minute break, and then we're going to go run another 800 miles with our 500-pound packs and sleep for 10 seconds over the next week. Or you can ring the bell and go grab a shower. These guys are all coming over. Bong, bong, bong. Anybody else? Bong, bong, bong. And he's like, I was just kidding. We're going to have a nice little barbecue, and we're going to take a little rest and have a good night's sleep before the last 3 days. And here these guys had committed years of their lives to this, and they had quit before they even took one more step with that heavy pack down the beach. And that's something I see in young people today, is they think, if I'm not qualified for this, if I don't have a roadmap for that, if I don't know how to do this, if I'm not trained for this, then I'm just not even going to try, because there's no way I'm going to do it. But my message to you, I've not done anything special. I'm not a smart guy. I dropped out of school 4 times. I have no college degree. I got married when I was 20. I have 10 children. I've helped build 2 successful companies. But all I did was try. I'm not that smart. I got a funny name. I really don't have a lot of strong skills. But My hope for all of you is that you read this book and you live your life not for yourself, not for your own glorification, not for your own edification, not for your own intelligence, but live it for God. And that's where you will find tremendous joy and happiness and a sense of fulfillment. You've been chosen by God and you have responded to his call. You are God's very gift to the world at this unique time in history. You've been presented the challenge to save souls for heaven, and you are forming yourselves for battle with none less than the Prince of Darkness himself. And it is most assuredly a battle of life and death. What is at stake? Not just the temporal life of this fading world, but life everlasting, life that never ends, life that partakes of the very presence of the Creator himself. St. Francis admonishes us to never be ashamed of actions which conduct us towards the love of God. Boldly acknowledge that you meditate, that you fight against sin, that you frequent the sacraments, and that you seek spiritual direction. Cultivate friends who share the same vision, friends who are ready to walk with you on this path that Francis calls the devout life. Maximize your positive contribution in this world so that you may spend the eternity of the next with God in heaven. God love you and inspire you in your individual vocations as you bring him to others so that he may bring you to your ultimate end, which is himself. And the final words I'll share are those of St. Francis. I beseech you, he says, in the name of all that is sacred, that you abide and persevere in this blessed undertaking. Ad majorem Dei gloriam. Thank you.